Hello everybody and welcome back to Space Engineers, the survival guide, the beginner survival guide to hopefully get yourself going on your own journey to Space Engineers. Now the first thing I want to comment on is the wonderful comments I get from everybody who responds to the series. Now there are a few things I haven't covered and purposefully haven't covered at this stage because either we'll go through them as we go through the guide, or that they're really not things that you need to worry about, because there's a lot of things you want to worry about. The one thing I do want to comment on is the power supply that I mentioned with the drop pod. Now this has lighting on it. Now depending on how you've set your lighting up, now I personally play with a mod called Space Just Got Real, which is a fantastic mod, and I'll include that in the description below because if you do want to play it. Now I haven't added it to this guide because I want to make it nice and clear for YouTube, because YouTube tends to darken everything anyway, but I do normally play with that, so I missed off mentioning about the lights. Now personally I wouldn't worry too much about the power usage of the lights. In hindsight, they really don't take that much power, not enough to worry about. If you also remove them, you also lose the ability to unlock, and I'll explain that in today's episode. So that's the reason why I haven't removed them. I left them on at this stage. Can, if you want to, if you feel like it's going to make any difference to your power supply, you can remove them. But before you do that, make sure you do what I'm going to show you today. The first thing we're going to do is talk about our battery. Now, although the battery wasn't a priority, you didn't have to do it. You know, you could have just done this with this power supply. If the power supply wasn't enough for what you needed, you could place a second turbine. But I like to have a bit of backup power. And the reason for that being is because if for some reason that gets damaged, if you've got, say, you've got the meteors on, or if you've got drones on, or something damages that power supply, though, you've got a backup power whilst you're away from your base. The reason why I mention that is if you're playing in multiplayer servers, or if you're just playing on your own and you go away from the render distance, this base could despawn. Space Engineers has a system that allows you to tidy up your world, so it keeps it nice and smooth and it doesn't lag, because unfortunately it lags when a lot of stuff that really doesn't mean anything is left in the game. So that's the reason why I put a battery power on now. That is not a requirement, you can completely leave that off if you want to, but since we've done it, and last time we queued our power cells, we've now got our power cells, we can now go ahead and we can whap on this battery so it's go. We'll just wait for it to get to its function queue. There we go. And obviously with 3 construction components short, we can whack 3 construction components in, that's no problem, but I'm not worrying too much. Now you'll also notice this is slightly in the ground. Don't worry about that, it's just because the blocks here are, they kind of basically go halfway into the ground. That's just what they do for, like, it's kind of like the build area for it, so don't worry about that, it doesn't change any effects. You can still gain access to it by the control panel here, but realistically you don't need to worry about that. All you need to know is that it's green here, which means it's gaining power, or it has power, it's connected, and it's turned on. If this was red, like so, it means it's switched off. All you need to do is go into your control panel, any control panel in any part of the base, and turn the power on. If it's yellow, sorry, wrong button there, it means it's recharge only, which means this is not powering the base, it's recharging itself. So that means that this here, this twin turbine here, is powering our battery power, and it's not giving anything out, which means the base will rely on the turbine only. This setup here, though, with it recharging, means it won't despawn because it technically has power. Discharge, sorry, is blue, which means it's putting all of its power into the base. It's not taking any power off the base, it's just literally emptying it. That is useful if you want to transfer power from one system to another, because if you destroy the battery, or you remove it, or anything like that, you lose all the charge in it. You lose all the power cells, you lose, you know, any kind of holding charge it's got. So if you want to do something, you want to remove a battery and you're running short on power, set something to discharge, and you can go ahead and just leave it there until it's fully empty. When it's fully empty, you'll have it with no blocks on it, and you know it's good to go, and you can remove it. But we want it where it's set to auto. So what it's going to do now is it's going to recharge when it can recharge. When the base requires more power, it will drain it from the battery and the turbine. The turbine is the main. It will take all the power from the turbine to power your base first, and then rely on any extras for your battery. That should now alleviate the problems we had with our basic refinery. A little blank there. Our basic refinery obviously needed that little bit of extra power, which was why it was going clunk, 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 clunk. So now if we take some stone, which I don't know if we've got anything left in our... We don't have anything left in this at all. We've got some ice, but that's not useful. So we'll just drop down into here. We'll grab some stone here, like so. Doesn't need to be too much, just to show what we're talking about. There we go. Goes down to the bottom. Pick up our stone. If you hold on to the F key and just look around like so, it does that last time. And we can fly ourselves over to here now. Now if we drop it into here, it's a nice smoother sound. And if we look at our battery power, you see it's fully depleted in 9 days. It's currently outputting more than it's inputting. Now in theory it does output everything from the battery, but obviously if that output was lower than the input, the battery would be recharging still because the turbine covers the power. And as you can see, now that we've no longer got any more stone, the output's dropped to 2 kilowatts, which is just basic power supply. Each one of these require minimum power, so 1 kilowatt is the minimum power required. So it's on standby mode. If you're wondering why it does that, well, if you have a computer, TV or anything like that on standby mode, it's still using power. So they've put that into the game. Tell you here what each one has its required input there. So that's the battery, and that's the reason why I placed the battery on now. As I say, it is not a priority, you don't need to worry about it, but what it does mean is that we're gaining power now whilst we're out doing our thing. Our base is recharging this battery so that when we come to later stuff, we've already got power stored in our base. And then when we've got problems with this here later, if this runs out of power, or if we decide to do something with it, then we've got a backup power here. And what we do today will also allow us to utilize this battery power as well. So what else are we going to do today? Well, today I'm going to go through basically breaking down this pod. Now there are two things you can do with this pod. You can convert it to a mining or reconnaissance ship, or you can break it down and use the components to build your own. There is no right or wrong way about doing that. There is a right or wrong way about how you build it, because obviously there are mechanics in the game, like, you know, your flight, your thrust, your lift and all that kind of stuff. But whether you decide to do it with the pod or whether you decide to do it on your own build, completely up to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and do a mining and reconnaissance ship. And what I mean by reconnaissance, I mean basically finding materials like magnesium. Now the only downside to reconnaissance vehicles is that you've got to be pretty close to the ground. So they only do 50 meters, so you're pretty low to the ground and you could risk obviously crashing into it. The Titan map, Triton, is pretty flat, so you're pretty safe. But if you're on Earth, there's hills and bumps and everything, so just be wary of that. On Earth there is a way of finding the ore, and when I cover the multiplayer series, I'll place the link in the description above, in the video above to that, and I'll just mention on there that there is ways to see it on Earth. If you're wondering now why, there are plenty of people who cover it in any of the beginner guides. So, but basically, you look on the ground and you'll see like little spots of different colours on the ground, like an orangey colour on the moon. I think it's a grey colour on Earth. That tells you that there's ore underneath it. Now, as far as I'm aware, that hasn't changed, and I don't think it will ever change. Unfortunately, on this map, there is no way whatsoever that I've been able to see so far where materials actually are. See, it's pretty white. I haven't noticed anything yet. If that changes, I'll comment on that and I'll let you know. But as far as I'm aware, that's all we've got. So we're going to have to do things the hard way. Now, if you notice, I was about 100 meters away, just over 100 meters away. Oh, 150. Yeah, so about 160, 170 there. I just picked it up. As you can see, it only actually comes up at about 115. Now, we can utilize that and we can fly around and we can wait for things to pop up on our screen. But as you can see, it's not always very reliable, because it's spawning in stuff around you and taking a little bit longer to spawn stuff in when you're flying around. But that is an opportunity, you can do that. What we want to do is we want to be able to mine freely away from our base, but also I want to set up a mining operation at our base. So there are two options for us, and the reason for that is because what we want to do with building ships, we need cobalt for. What do we need cobalt? Well, we need cobalt for the metal grids that are on these thrusters. There is no other way at the moment for us to get them. You don't get it from stone. So the only things we have is what is on our ship. Now, why do I grind the ship down, and why haven't I ground down the lights? Well, that's because you can unlock things in your progression. So the way you progress, as I've mentioned earlier, is that if you build an interior light, you then unlock all of these components here. Well, we have an interior light on our pod. So if we grind this down very carefully, and then we weld it back up, by building interior light, you have unlocked new blocks. And then we can go ahead and remove it. We can remove this one now. There we go. So we now no longer have interior lights. But there's one slight problem with this. We've nowhere else to respawn if we break this down. We've removed our lights, there's less power. Yeah, doesn't make much difference, but it is. We've got our O2 H2 generator. We've also got our survival kit. The survival kit acts as a respawn point. Now, if we go into here, and we go to survival kit, little search bar, we bring it down onto our toolbar, like so. You'll notice it gives you a nice big block, and it tells you need 20 steel plates and 10 steel plates, you know, to make it maximized. Everything else, exactly the same as a small block. Now, if you notice when I went onto the pod, it changed it to a small block. The only changes is steel plates and steel plates. And if we press number 9, it goes back to large block. No changes. So the only thing we need is the steel plates, which we can quite easily do now that we've got our refinery assembler set up. We've actually got enough there, so we won't bother building any more. If you didn't want to use that, you could go ahead and grind down these here. Be very careful not to grind anything that's holding our pod away, our pod together at the moment, but as you can see, we're getting ourselves some steel plates there. 5 steel plates. So by the time you've ground enough down, you've got enough to basically do the survival kit. Now, as I said to you, I'm going to grind the pod down and use the resources that we have for the pod to upgrade our base. And then we're going to build a ship to be able to gather materials, cobalt being the main thing for us. Now, 2 things we want to do. Number 1 is we want the survival kit on our base, and we want our O2 H2 generator on our base. Reason being is I don't want to break this down and have nowhere to respawn, because I'll respawn somewhere out there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grind it down, but we're going to empty it first. And at the moment we don't need gravel. Gravel is only used for nuclear components. We're nowhere near there, so we're just going to drag it and drop it. There we go, we got rid of it. It's on the ground there. You cannot drag and drop from this section here, so if I place it back into here, it won't let you drop it. You're going to bring it to your own personal inventory and then bring it out. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to grind it down. We're getting all these components that we need. And then I'm going to place it onto our base. Now, what I'm not going to do, because I want it nice and easy for me to access my refinery, and bear in mind I've done it this setup, I'm not going to then slap my survival kit in front there. 1, it's in the bloody way. And 2, it's going to have us access the survival kit first, which means every time I want to do something for the assembler, I'm going to have to change it over. I'll show that in a second. If I want to place it, I want to place it here. And then I'm going to rotate it around with my delete key, as usual. Have the screen facing me so that when I have it built, I can actually use it. And we're going to go ahead and weld that up. Now we need our steel plates from our refinery. There we go. And we're going to weld it up so it's usable. Now we've got everything in it. It's already placed all the components in, so we may as well chuck all the components in. There we go. Job's good. Right, now, what I mentioned before. If I go to build something in production, the first thing that comes up is the basic assembler, because it's connected to the refinery. So in theory, it's the first one you come to before anything else. If I then want to use my survival kit, which I won't use for production anymore, I have to drop it down. Had that been connected to the basic refinery, I'd have to go to production, and then I'd have to change it. Now, because the block is attached to the rest of the base, I can't access my production through. But because it's the first thing I connect to, it thinks I want to use this first, and that's secondary. I don't. I want to use that one first. That one's set. So I keep it separate. You've got an option later to connect them, or we can move our base around. As mentioned, this is going to be a mining platform anyway, so we're going to redo all of this at a later stage. But right now I want somewhere to respawn myself, not in the pod. Also, I now have access to the base's power to charge myself up. So I can go in the power that I needed. The one thing I can't do at the moment, which I'm relying on my pod, is to redo my H2 and my O2. Now, considering the planet is O2 rich, I'm not using O2. However, my H2 is a different story, and we're surrounded by ice, so I don't need to worry about ice gathering, which on Earth you would. However, we're using more power because it is colder, so I kind of need this setup because that's not going to last very long. So let's go ahead and let's get our O2 generator. Same thing as before. Now, you can grind these down if you want. You don't need to, because as long as you have access to it, you can grind it down. But what I want to do is I want to take out everything in it first. We grind it down, it's just going to dump it in there, and it's just okay. And then we're going to grind it down like so. We'll just grind them down because they're loose. Keep that connected for now, and I'll explain why shortly. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to place down our O2 generator. Again, if you search O2, bring you to the O2 H2 generator. Now this is a little bit harder to build because it's got 110 steel plates just to build the component itself. Obviously the smaller one is 6, so we got 6 and 2 out of that, but that one takes a lot more of every component bar the steel tubes and construction components. Oh no, sorry, the construction components is actually more for the smaller one. We want the larger one, and I want it to basically fill up my O2 and my H2 when I use my survival kit. And by doing that, you basically make sure that that little orange connector there is connected to the survival kit. And I'm going to place it that way. And then I'm going to load it up. And as you can see, we need a lot more steel plates. So I'm going to place the steel plates on for construction. Get up. If you're having problems like this, and what you can do is you can just grind a couple of these off. Go, get your little block here. Then if you mouse wheel, you have access to other shapes. Like so. And we can place a couple of ramps. And now I can just walk up it. A little bit easier, could have done that earlier, but no, it is what it is. So we're going to go to our production and we're going to basically place steel plates in. I'm not going to do 1,000 of them. I'm going to do 100 and I'm going to do 120. By doing that, it's the shift button for the 100 and then the control button for the 10. And it's going to just work through building that. We may have enough resources to produce them all, but it looks like we... Oh, did we do? I think we'll get away with doing them, so that's good. If we obviously need to go back and do some more mining, we've got our little pit there to do more mining and build our H2O2 generator. And you can keep grabbing these and filling them up as you go, and it'll keep building it. As you can see, we're going to need 1 more mortar and 2 more computers. We should have them in here somewhere. We do. You can just drag whatever you've got in. Now it looks like we have actually run out of... Yeah, we've run out of iron to be able to build the rest of the steel plates. So the option you have is... Oh, press the show inventory and right click. One component cannot be deposited. That was the ice, because this doesn't take ice. That's not a problem. Ice will go into our O2H2 generator. So what we can do is we can either grind this down to get the steel we want, or we can go back into our little hovel there and we can grab some more stone. I'm going to drop into the hovel there and grab some more stone. I'm going to come back, place the stone in there, and then I'm going to talk to you about the rest of this. And now we've got our steel plates done from our refinery and assembler, so we can now go ahead and place our O2H2 generator up. Now the reason why I like to have it up and done is because it's really the only thing that's going to keep your H2 going. Now you can place it in your survival kit. Now you can place it into your O2H2 generator like so, and now we've got ice in there, so hopefully now if we go to our survival kit, it fully recharges our H2. Now the only thing it won't do is it won't charge your bottles. So what you can do is, if we charge ourselves while we're here, if you place this on like so, it will show you all of them. You can just go ahead and slide your hydrogen bottle into like so, and it's fully charged. Drag it back out. We'll leave our O2 bottle in there because we don't need it, and we're good to go. So now we've got our oxygen and hydrogen supply, we've got our survivability, and we've got our refinery. Our next options are to basically get ourselves set up ready to go. Now there's another couple of things I'm going to point on this episode about this pod, and then on the next episode we're going to actually build ourselves a little miner. Hopefully we can get it off the ground and we can get some things done, because we're really lacking on some stuff. Now, the reason why I ground the survival kit and the whole 2HU generator off that onto these is because some of the components we cannot build. For example, the survival kit. We go to our little G here and go back to our survival kit. It needed medical components times 3. If we go and have a look at what we need for our medical components, it requires silver. Silver is a rare resource, and I haven't seen any on here, so you'd have to go around looking for it, increasing your chances of basically dying, so then you've got to respawn or you're going to lose power on that. Easiest way is just take it from one and place it onto the other. It was the same amount for both, so that was a good one. Now the other thing I wanted to comment on was the little thing I said, don't grind off. Now if we go ahead and grind this away, now they don't do anything. You've already got them unlocked, so you can just go ahead and grind them off. You don't have to worry about welding them up. But if you're ever wondering, well, what can I do? You can always look at your progression. And you'll notice that if you actually do a light armor block, you will unlock these. But the one that I did is a shape, which doesn't do anything for you. So the first thing we can do is one, we can weld one of these back up. Like so, and we've now unlocked more shapes. Or you could just weld one of the bigger ones. These take far less steel plates, so you're better doing that. Oh. Now you'll notice I've accidentally ground my seat away, and I have no way of rebuilding it. But what I can do is, if I actually look at my landing gear, because when you build something, you will always use a landing gear, because the landing gear is the easiest way of basically building something static, grinding it off, and having it fly. So they presume that's what you're going to do. If we look at progression of a landing gear, you'll notice it unlocks the seats that we need. That's what we had. It was just a passenger seat and everything else. So if you grind it down, like so, weld it back up, like so. By building landing gear, you have unlocked new blocks. Go around to our seat, and we can rebuild it if we want. If we do that, and we go to progression, we don't gain anything from doing it. If we do control stations, or any of these here, we will have something, which will be important later. And we'll go on to that. But we've got everything we need from that seat there. So the seat's gone now. The other thing is the small conveyor here. If we grind this off, this is actually a conveyor junction, and we weld it back up, it tells us we have unknown tech. So what do we do? Well, you can go around and grind everything. Give ourselves a little bit more room here if we want. We can go around and grind everything off like so. Like so. Just being very careful. Weld it back up. And then we can weld it back up. So you can do things like that, because everything that's on here has to be built by you, or can be built by you by basically reverse engineering. Now we can safely grind these off. Like so. And if you notice there, we got some broken metal. That's because there was something in it, and as we were grinding, the metal actually caught the grinder, and broke. We can go ahead and grind these off. Now we're going to need that there, so I'm going to grind the landing gear, because we don't need that anymore. We can take the scrap metal, take the space credits, and these hydrogen thrusters have they have 4 metal grids. The thrusters have 1 metal grid. From that one hydrogen thruster there, we're going to get 4. As you can see, we can't do anything with it. If you remember what I mentioned about the seat itself doesn't do it, but the flight control stuff will do it. So we don't need to worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dump everything into my base, like so. The one component that couldn't be dropped is the space credits. If you notice that little sound it just made then, that was the scrap metal that went into there. It's actually basically redone the scrap metal into useful components. So don't throw it away, it's still useful. We can go ahead now, we can grind away whatever we want. Now, the beacon is basically what's telling us where our pod is. There we go, we've now unlocked the beacon. Timer block. Doesn't give you anything because it's already unlocked everything. Parachute hatch. Nope, nothing. So you can go ahead and grind that. It may seem like a little bit of a tedious thing to do, but it just means that you unlock everything that you need or can build at a later stage. Remember, the thrusters we can't do just yet, but we'll deal with that at a later stage. That's everything now. The only thing that basically has use or value is the thrusters themselves have the components that we want, and the battery pack has power. Now, we are generating power, so personally, I wouldn't worry about the power loss to this, but if you are, what you can do is you can actually grind everything away and make sure everything stays connected to the power pack. And then you can build around the power pack. It's a small grid power pack, so it does serve purpose for us. And if you have a look, if we just jetpack here and rise up like this, you'll notice it is technically connected to these blocks here and this landing gear here. Now, the only downside is that's pretty low to the ground. So what you're going to build means that you're basically your battery pack's going to be damn close. But that might be something we can do. So I'm going to save the power pack and I'm going to try and see if we can actually build off it. If we can't, then we'll just have to build our own power pack and continue with it that way. But that's it for this episode. There are nothing much else on this other than let's just double check and make sure our antenna. I believe the antenna has unlocked new blocks for us as well. The ore detector. Nope, that's basically the same as the antenna, so that's done. Again, if you want to know directly what things are and what you need to weld, then all you need to do is just go to your progression window here and it shows you everything as I've mentioned. So you don't need to do exactly what I'm doing. But as you noticed, that was our spawn beacon, our beacon there that we ground, which gave us doors. So we've unlocked most things now. The only thing we haven't unlocked is the thrusters, which is by doing the tanks. Or we've got the hydrogen engine. Or these things here. These tools, weapons, and atmospheric thrusters, which we'll get by unlocking one of these. Everything else, we don't need to worry too much about. We'll actually unlock them as we go. The only other thing you might want to do is do your decorative plaques, depending on which ones you've bought. And that's just basically by building an interior wall, you will unlock all your decorative stuff there. Doors. If you want hangers or gates, you'd have to do your doors. And then these things here, we don't need to worry too much about. We'll unlock these as we go. Jukebox, again, is decorative. So we've pretty much unlocked everything we need to use now, apart from the thrusters. So I'm happy with what we've done just from this pod. So what I'm going to do now is off camera I'm going to grind the pod away. I'm going to put whatever components I can into the base. Hopefully we'll get everything in there. If we can't get everything in, we'll just leave what we can't. But the storage on these is pretty big for what we need. And we can get away with putting most of it in. Yeah, so we've got like 2,000 out of 20,000. The reason why my area is so big is obviously I mentioned that we've got 10 times inventory. You need to really put that on. If you put realistic inventory on, you're really not going to be able to carry much, and it's just going to take you so much longer to do anything. Now, the one thing I do want to comment before we go is these here only hold above them. They don't have connection points to the side of them. So this is technically not holding anything in at all, that one there, and neither is that one there. That one, however, is holding the battery, and the whole pod is connected to the battery. You can safely grind away at everything as long as you leave them connected. It will not move, it will stay stationary, it will stay connected to it. And that's useful to know because that's how we're going to build our future ships, by just one of these landing gears. Because once you've got one landing gear, it doesn't matter how big you make it, one landing gear is connected to the ground and will not drop the ship. Bear in mind your heights, that's the only other thing you've got to worry about. Hopefully this video has kind of helped you out a little bit about keeping yourself alive. I know it's a few things that probably don't need to be mentioned, however, it does make it a little bit easier when you're trying to do this yourself. We need some energy. Now, if you don't want to keep going to your survival kit all the time and doing that, I'd suggest it's better doing it this way because you're charging your H2 up at the same time, so you're using less of your bottle every time. But if you really don't want to do that, you can place yourself a seat down. We've now unlocked a seat. You can place a seat down on any of these blocks and you sit in the seat and it'll charge your power up, just the same as it did with the pod. And as I've mentioned, there are a lot of things there that are a bit extra information for you. I try to bring in little bits of information that I can to just kind of help you get on your own ways, and obviously you can take what you learn from this and incorporate it into whatever way you want to play. I'm now going to grind that pod down. If you'd like to see the pod being converted, then let me know. I can spawn in another pod and do just a generic episode on the pod conversion. But realistically, what we're going to do is not much different to what you can do with the pod, and you can take what you learn from that and use the pod. I don't personally see the use of the pod, but a lot of people do. So, as I say, hopefully you've learned something. If you've got any questions or comments, please make sure you leave them in the comment section below. I will include anything anybody mentions that is relevant to the series into an episode and cover it. Even if I have to comment on it, it will be included in there. So keep an eye out for any of your questions that you've had appearing in further episodes. Until next time, everybody, take care for now, and I'll see you all on the next one. Bye bye for now.